Welcome to the Student Pilot Podcast. My name is Simon Callis, a flight school owner. Each week, myself and my guests will be talking all things flight training and beyond to help inspire, motivate and support you on your journey to becoming a private or commercial pilot. Okay, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. My name's Simon, and today we're with Steve, our ATO head of training, and we've got a bit of a controversial subject we'd like to talk about today. What is it, Steve?
We're talking about, are you flying illegally?
Are you flying illegally? Okay, so let's put that into context. Okay, so we're talking about license currency and requirements for legal flight. So currency is your ability to exercise the privileges of your ratings. So let's have a look first off at the UK PPL requirements. Steve, do you want to take that?
So the PPL to stay current, the validity of an SEP, so single engine piston rating, which is what you'd have on your PPL, is 2 years. However, for the hours to count, it's only in the 1 year, the 12 months preceding the expiry.
Yeah.
So within the 12 months preceding expiry, you need to have done 12 hours of flight, of which 6 are pilot in command, 12 takeoff and landings, and 1 hour dual with an instructor.
Yeah, so essentially, if you look at that, you could do potentially 6 hours dual if you wanted as well, and 6 hours pilot in command, but 6 hours is the minimum. So a lot of people get confused about this. So the license itself is lifelong, but the SEP rating's only valid for 2 years. Now, in order for that to be valid as well, within 3 months of the expiry, you need to get an instructor to have flown with you and sign that off to count for a revalidation by experience, as we call it. So you must have that signature on your license before it expires. Alternatively, you can get an examiner to do that, provided you've got the 1 year with 1 hour with an instructor. They can sign it off. So there are 2 different ways you can do that. So just to recap on that, you need the 12 hours in the last 12 months of a 2 year period. They can be minimum 6 hours solo and the rest can be dual. You need 1 hour training with an instructor, and you need to have your license signed off to revalidate for another 2 years, either by the instructor that flew with you or by an examiner. And we call that revalidation by experience. Now, Steve, what happens if that doesn't work? What happens if you run out of validity?
So if you run after that, it's got to be... So that's a revalidation, as you say. The terminology is quite important. If you go past, even by a day, that day, it becomes a renewal.
Yeah. And
you must do training as required, get a course completion certificate, and then a test with an examiner. So an SEP, license proficiency check.
Now, one thing that came up recently, we did have a inquiry from somebody who had done, they had done the hours and they had done the hour with an instructor, but they didn't get it signed. So one question we got was, can you backdate it?
Nope.
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
Okay.
No, if you go over even 1 day, no, it's if that's not signed on your license, and the CAA will check.
Yeah.
When you've done all the flights and everything, it becomes a renewal, and you must do the test.
So this is really important, because it does seem that I think by the time people get round to revalidation, sometimes they're so far out of training and their life took over with other stuff they've got going on, they forget the privileges of their license somewhat, and they forget what's required. So you do need to keep on top of this stuff. And one way which you could do it, which I found quite useful, is to get a digital logbook, because it can flag you up things in terms of currency and what you need to do. So let's have a look at the UK LAPL then. So the UK LAPL is very different in that it's an SEP license, isn't it? It's not. Doesn't have the rating. So do you want to go through the requirements for that, Steve?
Yeah. So just the distinction first. So the PPL is a license you can add all sorts of ratings on. The LAPL is SEP only. Mm-hmm. So you need to be able to, so the day you want to go flying, you need to be able to look back 24 months and in that time have 12 hours flying, 12 takeoff and landings and 1 hour of an instructor.
Yeah. So it's 12 hours in the last 2 years from the date you want to fly, 1 hour with an instructor, 12 takeoffs and landings. So, for example, if you've only flown 5 hours in that period, you need 7 hours to be legal. And at least one of these needs to be with an instructor. So if you get to that 2-year point and you haven't got the hours, you can't fly anymore. So how it works is, from what I understand, Stephen, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that you need to make up the balance of hours. So in this instance, if you did 5 hours, you'd need 7 hours to be legal. They have to be either dual or under supervision of an instructor.
Yeah, so if the instructor deems fit, they could send you solo. But you can also do a test, by the way.
Yes.
So let's say you hadn't flown at all in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
It'd be more appropriate to do a test.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think, rather than trying to do the 12 hours dual and supervised solo, as you say. But yeah, so it can be either dual or supervised solo if the instructor deems it suitable.
Sure. Okay. Obviously, after successful completion of those hours, you can continue to fly as normal. But one thing that's really important with the LAPL is taking passengers. So when you are under solo supervision, even though you technically have a license, you cannot take a passenger. Okay. So you need to wait until you're current again until you can take a passenger. Now, back to taking passengers, one thing that's come up recently with LAPL, which has always been the case, but people kind of forget it, is when you get an LAPL, you have to do at least 10 hours solo post-license issue. So it can't be any of the hours that you've done in your training. It's 10 hours post-license issue before you can take a passenger. And this came up recently because we had somebody who was... he'd chopped and changed schools many times, and he ended up being quite a high hours LAPL holder. I think he's about 90 hours or something like that. It doesn't matter how many hours you've got during your course of training, you cannot take a passenger until you've done 10 hours PIC post-license issue. Okay, so it can't even be with an instructor. It has to be pilot in command.
Yeah. So just another point on the LAPL, if I may. So we said with the PPL, it must be signed.
Yeah.
The LAPL must not be signed, just to complicate things.
Yeah.
So PPL, you must have that signature before your SEP expiry. The LAPL is an SEP only license, so you don't... it doesn't get signed. There should be no signatures on a LAPL. If there is, it's invalid. So it's a rolling thing. You need to look at your logbook, and the day you want to go flying, you look at 24 days back from 24 months back from there.
Yeah.
And the requirements need to fall within that.
The only other thing I wanted to clarify on the LAPL, just while I think about it, is whilst we were talking it, we said it's an SEP only license. Technically correct, but there are 2 ratings you can get with it, aren't there? You can get the aerobatic and the night rating. They're the only 2 separate ratings you can get.
That still falls under SEP.
Yeah. So the next one really is the 90-day passenger rule. Now, loads of people fall short of this. It's and again, this is where actually I think the electronic logbook helps, doesn't it? Because it tells you how many landings you've done. So basically, in the last 90 days, you must have done 3 takeoffs and landings so that you can legally take passengers. How many people have we seen forget this? They come to hire, they come along with all their family. Oh, we're going flying.
And that's a legal requirement. It's not a school thing. Schools are free to put restrictions on top of that should they see fit to protect their assets. But that's a legal requirement. Yeah. And for those who've got a night rating, so as Simon said, it's 3 takeoff and landings in the previous 90 days. In order to take passengers. And if you want to fly at night with passengers, only one of those needs to be at night. Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about some real world scenarios then. So let's say you've got a PPLA. You've done 12 hours in the last 12 months of your SEP rating validity period. You've done your hour with an instructor, but you forgot to get your license signed by an instructor. You haven't got an SEP, it's lapsed.
Yeah.
Basically, so you've got to do a test now. Okay,
with an examiner.
With an examiner, that's the only option, I'm afraid. You cannot backdate these things. So the key thing is, if you're ever unsure about any of this stuff, is ask your school, ask your instructor. look it up on the CA website. But I think, we've seen several instances of this where people are not sure, and I think it's really worthwhile just checking your logbook, making sure your license, is current, it's been signed, because it's so easy to forget. But in reality, it's your responsibility as pilot in command to make sure this stuff happens. It's your license, and legally you should carry it with you. I've refused people flying before because I haven't got my license, but you should carry it with you. If you get ramp checked, they're going to ask for it.
And you do get ramp checked. I've been ramp checked many times. It does happen.
Absolutely. So I hope you guys found that interesting anyway. And it's just something to recap on. It's not necessarily to do with training as such, but it happens immediately after your training. You go and fly, you hire aeroplanes, and this stuff is really, really important. So we thought we'd go over it, recap it so everyone's clear about it. And we hope you found it useful, and we'll see you on the next one. Don't forget to like and subscribe and ding the bell for the next episode. Thank you. If you like this episode, please like, subscribe and ding the bell to receive notifications of the next episode.